it's taking that rage and that grief and taking it and putting it towards something constructive and putting it towards focusing on change in her honor.
Tonight, a police watchdog releases their findings into the Vancouver Police Department's handling of a missing woman's case.
I really wish to see her one day once again.
A vigil was held in freezing temperatures in Winnipeg for Avontai Hartlieb.
We do believe that those projects will be sort of construction ready sometime this year. The expectation is late summer, early fall.
And a proposed northern road to link the Ring of Fire region in northern Ontario continues to the next steps.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We start in British Columbia, where a judgment has come down about how Vancouver police treated the case of a young Indigenous woman who was reported missing. APTN's Tina House starts us off tonight.
It's been almost 4 years since Tatiana Harrison last saw her daughter Tatiana alive, and she still has so many questions as to what happened to her daughter. On May the 3rd, 2022, Natasha reported her missing to Vancouver police because she was last seen in Vancouver. However, because Tatiana's last interaction with police was in Surrey, the Vancouver Police Department sent the file to Surrey RCMP. Natasha says that jurisdictional delay could have potentially helped police find her daughter sooner.
They lost evidence. It took them, 20 days to take that file back, and that's 20 days of lost evidence.
Tatiana, who was 20 years old at the time, was last seen on surveillance video withdrawing money at this Royal Bank on Main and Hastings Street. Natasha spent the next 3 months searching for her daughter, walking the streets day and night, putting up posters, hoping someone knew where her daughter was. In mid-July of 2022, Richmond RCMP had released this sketch of a Jane Doe whose remains had been found on a dry-docked yacht in a marina along the Fraser River in Richmond. They stated the woman was in her 30s and Caucasian. On August the 6th, DNA results concluded that Jane Doe was actually 20-year-old Tatiana Harrison. Although the sketch looks nothing like Tatiana, she's not in her 30s, and they got her height wrong as well.
They deemed her death to be to an overdose. Then they overturned it, and it was to sepsis. And now with a second opinion, it is undetermined her death, and we're waiting on an inquest to find out what really happened to her because of all the questions.
Sue Brown is a lawyer for Justice for Girls. They filed a complaint to the Office of Police Complaints Commission about how her case was handled by police. The OPCC, represented by retired Judge Brian M. Neal, agreed with the family and found that 2 VPD officers committed misconduct for failing to conduct a missing person risk assessment into the initial investigation into Tatiana Harrison's disappearance.
Finding of misconduct on a police officer is a significant finding that will impact their career. And I think more broadly, retired Judge Neal's findings and his analysis really point to larger policy and systemic issues within policing in the province, as well as in Vancouver.
For Tatiana's mom, Natasha, who still hasn't been able to bury her daughter because she remains with the coroner pending a coronary inquiry, she says she'll continue to fight for justice for her daughter. How have you been able to deal with all these years later?
Rage. I think it's taking that rage and that grief and taking it and putting it towards something constructive and putting it towards focusing on change in her honor.
APTN requested an interview with the Vancouver Police Department, but did not hear back by the time this story went to air. Tina House, APTN National News, Langley.
A blizzard couldn't stop dozens of friends, family, and community members from honoring Avante Hartlieb Monday evening. Organized by outreach group Morgan's Warriors, the vigil saw drummers sing to her spirit, while red roses laid down in her memory became speckled with snow. Some said the winter storm reminded them of the 18-year-old girl who they called a little tornado. Hartlieb died Valentine's Day morning near Winnipeg's downtown. Winnipeg Police's homicide unit charged a 14-year-old male with second-degree murder and criminal negligence causing death in connection to the crime. Hartlieb's mother flew in from Calgary, and other youth from her group home came to pay respect to the young woman. They gathered in their ribbon skirts and winter jackets on a street corner near the house where Avante was shot. Avante's boyfriend, Ethan Tilling-Bell, says he used all of his strength to return to an area that has caused great pain so he could honor her spirit.
She was very caring. She may have been younger than me, but you know, she had a good head on her shoulders, even, you know, through the hardest of times. She lost somebody and she didn't cry, and I find that very, very strong of her, you know. You know, she used to just say, well, they're in a better place now, and I like to think of it the same way. I do. I really wish to see her one day once again, you know? Even if it's just for a conversation or just to say what's up, because it was a lot to lose her.
Correctional Service Canada has issued an alert for an escaped inmate in the Prince Albert, Saskatchewan area. On February 20th, an inmate escaped while being transported by staff from the Saskatchewan penitentiary. 30-year-old Kaeston Custer from Sturgeon Lake First Nation is serving 10 years for manslaughter, riot, and possession of property obtained by crime. Custer is 5 foot 10 inches tall, weighs 181 pounds, and has a medium complexion, brown eyes, and black hair. Correctional Service Canada has shared information with Prince Albert Police and the RCMP. They're asking anyone with information on his whereabouts to contact Prince Albert Police Service or the local RCMP detachment. Those fighting against the practice of forced sterilization were in Ottawa on Tuesday to call for the passage of Bill S-228. At a press conference Tuesday morning, supporters of the bill included the Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice and Conservative MP Jamie Schmale. Forced sterilizations have disproportionately affected Indigenous women. The proposed legislation would make the practice a criminal offense. It has already passed through the Senate and is scheduled for second reading in the House of Commons on Thursday. Senator Yvonne Boyer, who sponsored the bill, outlined why it is urgently needed.
This bill exists because survivors came forward. They told Canada what happened to them, not generations ago, but in modern hospitals, in our lifetime, and in cases as recent as 2024 to young women. They told us they were sterilized at their most vulnerable time, during labor, while under medication, under pressure, or facing threats from an authority figure while they could not challenge it.
A series of open houses is underway to gather feedback on the preferred corridor for the proposed Northern Road link in Northern Ontario. The project would be part of a network of roads connecting mineral development in the Ring of Fire region to the Ontario Provincial Highway System. APTN's Mike McDonald reports.
The Northern Road link will span anywhere from 117 to 164 kilometers depending on which route is decided on, and will cross the Attawapiskat River. It will connect the proposed Webequie Supply Road and the Martin Falls Community Access Road, both of which are proceeding through their own regulatory review processes. Speaking on behalf of Martin Falls First Nation, Qasim Sadiq says some of the feedback up to this point has focused on maintaining safe access to traditional territory around the project site.
If I had to say what's the top thing that we're trying to do at this stage, it is to ensure that the project chooses an alternative which minimizes its impact on traditional rights across our sort of chosen corridor. So that's the first one. The second one right after that would be trying to choose an alternative which is technically feasible, which means something we can construct in the future.
Sadiq estimates it will be at least another 2 years before work can begin on the project.
The Northern Road Link project is about just over 2 years behind the Martin Falls Community Access Road and the Webequie Supply Road. So, we take that as a gauge for the time required for this project to go into construction compared to those other projects. We do believe that those projects will be sort of construction ready sometime this year. The expectation is late summer, early fall.
As for economic benefits, Sadiq says First Nations people in the immediate area of the project will be given priority for construction jobs.
We do believe the project offers a relatively large number of job opportunities. We don't have that exact number just yet, but we do believe it will be significant enough for neighboring First Nations to participate in the same opportunity. So right after Martin Falls and Webbequay, jobs would be open for neighboring First Nations. And then after that, broadly for Indigenous people across Canada.
The Northern Road Link project is still subject to provincial and federal assessments, which examine potential environmental, social, economic, and cultural impacts. The current series of open houses will wrap up February 26th. Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Métis Nation Saskatchewan says it has heard from its citizens and finding a way to keep its mental health and addiction services going. That story and more still to come. Welcome back. Construction of Canada's first Indigenous healing space in a children's hospital has begun in Winnipeg. The healing space is being made to serve kids and their families to provide cultural connections. The project is led by Indigenous elders, health experts, children, and families. Children's Hospital says the project is a response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Patricia Burke is head of the Children's Hospital. She says that at any given time, up to 60% of patients are Indigenous children, many of whom have to travel away from their home communities to receive care. The healing space will give families and children a home away from home. Manitoba Indigenous Futures Minister Ian Bushy says the NDP are donating $1 million to the Children's Hospital, with $500,000 going to the healing space.
You can see people when they come to the hospital maybe on some of their most difficult days. So if there's things we can do as society, things we can do for our young people to make them feel a little bit better on some of those most trying days, then we should do it. We should do that each and every opportunity that we have. So creating spaces such as the community healing space here, we'll do that.
Last week, Métis Nation Saskatchewan told its members using the mental health support line that federal funding for the program would end. Then Monday, MNS announced short-term funding has been secured to keep the service available. The support line offers culturally specific help for Métis people between 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. weekdays. While that funding will cover the short term, MNS says they are pursuing long-term funding to keep the program alive. Beverly Fullerton is the MNS Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Our citizens loud and clear over the last week and even prior to that. The cuts to our mental health supports program are having a devastating impact to those who rely on those services. And these are our citizens accessing counseling, therapy, and culturally responsive supports during the most vulnerable moments of their lives.
Where New South Wales Police have been ordered to pay nearly $2 million in legal costs to 7 Indigenous men they were prosecuting for illegal abalone trafficking. The case was dropped after it was revealed the prosecution knew that evidence from a confidential Native title claim undermined their own case.
Almost 2 years of uncertainty at an end.
Real intimidating, and that was pretty scary. I'm an Aboriginal coastal diver. Use my resources from the ocean to provide for my family, but...
John Henry Carriage among the 7 Wabunja men facing charges of illegal abalone trafficking, all dropped after just 11 days in Nowra court. New South Wales Police footing the bill for $1.9 million in defence costs, having already spent millions on a 6-month joint New South Wales Police and fisheries surveillance operation of the fishermen. Newly released documents show that this could have been avoided.
In this case, it became apparent that the prosecution had become aware of evidence that was directly relevant, but for one reason or another, were not able to or were not giving us access to this material.
Jalal says this impacts the right to a fair trial, and the repeated prosecution and withdrawal of cases is not an isolated pattern for the South Coast.
My client and many of the other accused have been prosecuted multiple times. This repeated process of being charged, arrested, prosecuted, being put on bail, having a hearing date that they will be waiting for, in this case, for close to 2 years, to then have the charges go away, but not being put in a clearer position as to where they stand at law, has been a frustrating process and a disempowering process.
NITV has contacted the New South Wales Agriculture Minister for a response. Meanwhile, New South Wales Police has said the force acknowledges the ruling by the court and will examine the details of the cost order. Phoebe McIlwraith, NITV News.
Time for one last quick break, but stick around. There's more to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And sometimes even the cattle want to gather around the fire as Michael has cleared some felled trees near Abitibi-Temiskaming, Ontario. Thanks for sharing. With a chance to be our next photo of the day, send your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather.
Starting on the East Coast, 0 for Halifax, -3 and cloudy for Fredericton. -25 for Kuujjuaq, 18 below for Nain. -1 and cloud for Montreal, cloudy and 3 below for Val-d'Or. -6 for Sault Ste. Marie, there will be snow, and 0 for Ottawa. Sunny and -6 for Thunder Bay, 11 below for Sioux Lookout. -12 for God's Lake and Norway House. -9 for Winnipeg, 3 below for Dauphin. 0 for Regina, +1 for Saskatoon. 1 above in Meadow Lake, cloudy, and 0 for La Ronge. In northern Alberta, flurries and -7 for High Level, +2 for Grand Prairie. 5 above with the sun out in Edmonton, sunny, and 7 for Medicine Hat. 7 in Vancouver, 8 above for Victoria. 3 in Prince George, 2 for Smithers. -27 for Old Crow, 7 below for Whitehorse. -16 in Yellowknife, 20 below for Norman Wells. -32 in Sax Harbor, 22 below for Paulatuck. -21 in Chesterfield, 37 below for Cambridge Bay. -38 for Resolute and Arctic Bay, 39 below in Igloo Lake.
Our Savannah Craig spent time in Minneapolis, Minnesota last week, reporting on how Native Americans have been affected by ICE operations. Savannah still has some stories to roll out, but she's here now to talk about some of the things she saw and heard when the camera stopped rolling. Savannah, good to see you. Great work while you were down there. What did you see, though, when you didn't have your camera rolling?
Yeah, there were lots of things that we saw when the cameras weren't rolling. One of them was actually a woman who was being released from the Whipple Detention Center in Minneapolis, and she had a blanket covering her. This is one of the reasons why we didn't film her, out of respect. And what was quite striking to me is that she didn't have proper footwear on. She had high heels, open-toed. She looked quite cold. It was just after a snowstorm, and this is something that a lot of people on the ground had been telling me, is that many people are being released, whether it's in the night or in the day, and they're not properly dressed as they're released in what they were detained in, which is in many cases for some people without a coat, not dressed properly, and expected to find their way home in very frigid temperatures. Another thing that we saw, but also we experienced, is that even though ICE is winding down their operations in Minneapolis, there are still agents on the ground. There's a lot of fear that community members are experiencing. And with so many people that I spoke to in Minneapolis, there was just so much fear and just so much trauma that's been not only created but sort of resurrected from this historical trauma of the state taking Indigenous people from their families. And this is something that is so thick in the air that you feel that, you know, even these operations are winding down, the anxiety and the fear and the trauma, it's still very much there.
Right. What was the response from people that you interviewed?
Yeah, the response from people we interviewed on the ground was very positive. In fact, so many people thanked us for being there, and they said that they feel very abandoned by media at the moment as ICE is winding down its operations. You know, as we've seen on national news, international news, journalists have been quite present on the ground as we've seen people being taken, detained, a lot of violence in the interactions between community members and ICE agents. However, now that operations are winding down, there aren't a lot of journalists there. Of course, local journalists, but there aren't a lot of national, international journalists. So many people were thanking us for being there, saying, you know, ICE's operations, they're not done, and there's still effects to be felt from what's been happening in the Twin Cities. So I think it was a very important time for us to be there, and a lot of people really gave us a lot of gratitude for being there and continuing the reporting.
Nice. Now I know you still have more to come. What can we expect?
Yeah, there will be a couple more stories to be released this week. One you can expect is from an artist from the Karuk tribe. She shares how she's resisting ICE through her art. Another one is speaking with a community member, Jackie Wilson, who works at a local Native American community center in the Native corridor of Minneapolis. And she shares with APTN how she's trying to support community members at this difficult time, and you can stay tuned on APTN National News to watch these reports.
Good stuff, Savannah. Looking forward to it. Appreciate you joining us to talk about your trip and reporting there.
Thank you for having me.
Diane Rusin has spent decades working with Indigenous families and children in Winnipeg's North End. As project director of the Winnipeg Boldness Project, she has strived to use the wisdom of those families to make changes in areas like child welfare, poverty, and the justice system. Here's a preview of our conversation on tonight's episode of Face to Face.
When we see those systems change, and they change in the way that families are asking them to change, I think we're going to see things like less people getting incarcerated. We're going to see less children in the care of CFS. We're going to see more graduation rates. We're going to see more employment, you know, more people starting businesses and so on and so forth. So when people are able to participate in society and in the economy based on their strengths, I think we all flourish and we all thrive.
And you can catch our entire conversation with Diane right here in about 60 seconds from now. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Have a great night.